I found the two people in the world who hadn't seen Airplane. Let's talk about it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, if you're new, Daniel here will explain to you what we're going to be discussing or debating.
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week we're talking about the 1980 comedy Airplane, which I have seen a whole bunch of times over the last couple of years, and the two of you have just seen for the first time, right? So how come you had never seen Airplane before, and what did you think of it watching it for the first time in 2025?
I actually saw clips of a scene of Airplane, so clearly it's had cultural impact. In terms of why I haven't seen it, I have no idea. to answer with you. It came out in 1980. I've seen old movies, but generally like films from the 80s, I don't think I've watched much of. So maybe that's another reason. But in terms of how I felt about the movie, I was surprisingly surprised. It was very entertaining. There was maybe a lot of references that I didn't understand. But even though I didn't understand references, it was still funny. So the references which I did understand, it was hilarious. And those type of movies, I don't generally watch them of my own accord. I only watch them if someone wanted to go and watch a film like that at the cinema. That is another reason why I probably didn't watch this movie. But after watching this movie, I am definitely going to watch more like it. I asked you, Daniel, about, I think you said it's called Naked Gun, another movie. So I'm gonna go and check out Naked Gun. But this one, it was one thing I did also realize as well, because Daniel, you mentioned this before. Something like this couldn't be released today. And I was thinking about the question, and at first I was thinking I could, but then after seeing what was like being said, I was like, yeah, I think you're right. I don't think they would allow a movie like this to be like just released, which is a bit annoying. Like the two scenes I'm mainly referring to are the black guy speaking a whole different dialect language or whatever, and then the comment which went viral, which is still viral to this day, is the little white girl that's drinking the coffee and saying, I like my coffee black just like my man, which is crazy because it's like, even though it's funny, but it's like I don't think like now the audience will take that well because there's a little girl that's saying it. Back in the day, they'll be like, yeah, it's just for fun. But now it's like, yeah, even though it's for fun, still a little girl shouldn't be saying that. So I think there would be a lot of no-nos if someone was to drop something like that, which is a bit annoying because I do want to see something like that being dropped in our time. But I do understand, but sometimes people kind of like take the piss, and then they'll just create madness. When I say madness, I mean like racist madness, just crazy. They might go a bit overboard. So it's annoying. But I would want something like this to drop in our generation, because this is my kind of comedy where they're just taking the piss out of everyone.
I mean, this one was just one that was never on my radar. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit like Jonathan, where I have not a dislike, but like I'm a little bit more apprehensive to approach older movies just because of like the older production, the older kind of like filming style, acting style, and this and the others. But again, as we've been doing these videos, I've come to appreciate a lot more older movies. But it's just one that wasn't really one that I was aware of. But having watched it, I think I've got to agree with Jonathan. I was concerned at first. I was like, okay, what am I in for? Like, what am I about to expect? I was a little bit like, what's the comedy gonna be like in the 80s or whatever. But very, very quickly, I was like eased into this movie. I was like made to feel comfortable because these are my type of jokes, man. A lot of these were just very. It was just like some of them were like a little bit like, I wouldn't say outrageous because I don't think anything in here was like super offensive or anything like that. But it was just like kind of like pushing the boat a little bit, and I was just like honestly loving it and appreciating some of the jokes. Of course, there was like stuff in here that I didn't get, and like there was like references that I sort of kind of like didn't understand, but just a lot of like the silliness and a lot of like the stupidness. Even the whole thing of like, what was it again? The thing about how long till we land, and he's like, oh, I don't know. It sounded like I can't remember the lines like word.
He said 2 hours.
The joke, yeah, and then he's like, oh, it's gonna take you 2 hours to predict when we're gonna land. He's like, no, like even just like stupid stuff like that, like was just like tickling me throughout this movie. So actually, I would say like this could be a classic. If I like genuinely, like when I finished watching it, I was like, it's not that long. Like it's really good. It's even got like a good enough plot for you to kind of like follow through with it as well. And I was like, I really actually kind of want to watch that again, actually, because I watched it by myself, and I was like, I'd actually love to kind of like watch this with someone else as well. So, yeah, it's kind of borderline got the potential to be a classic.
So I've got good news for you. So the bad
Yeah.
news is there aren't a lot of movies like this. And we'll, I guess, get into how this is set apart from other comedy movies, right? Like we've seen Scary Movie, which is very much follows in the footsteps of this, right? 20 years later. But they made a couple more movies like this, and like with the same writer-director. A few of them are as good as this, but a lot of them very quickly drop off in quality. And I think this has kind of the distinction of being both, I'm not sure if it's the first of the ones they made, but it's like the most consistently high quality, right? Because I think the reason for it is that it has a very serious and grounded plot. And then we put jokes on top of that, but everything kind of, there's like a red through line, right? Like there's a progression from one scene to the next that makes sense. It's not just weird stuff for 80 minutes, right? There's actual plot and actual characters, and there's like stakes and everything. So if you just cut out the jokes, it's still a functioning movie, and then we add the jokes on top, which is what Scary Movie also tried to do, right? With its strong central plot, right? But I think this one just hits the sweet spot exactly of how much plot, how much character, how many jokes, how much surrealism, how much groundedness. It just manages to kind of hit that like the thread like 5 different needles at the same time, right? And I think that is really what makes this really stand out. And the good, so the bad news is there aren't a lot at this quality level, in my opinion. The good news is there are so many jokes you have to watch it 4 or 5 times before you've gotten all the jokes, because there's so much stuff going on that I guarantee you missed half of it. And that's not jokes that, like, there's like a few things in there that we just have no chance of getting. There's one in here that parodies like a 1950s coffee commercial. The thing about where like the wife says Jim never has a second cup of coffee at home, and then later on he vomits and she says Jim never vomits at home. That's spoofing a 1950s coffee commercial. You just have to accept that it's there. That's what it is, right? And I think that's one of those ways. Okay, clearly referencing something, and I wish I knew what it was, and we just have no idea. But the vast majority of this is universal. Like it's just a side gag, or it's just something that you don't need any background to get why this is funny. So yeah, so you're in for at least multiple rewatches before you've exhausted this one. You've both kind of mentioned it, but like any favorite gags that stood out?
I would say, Jonathan mentioned one of the whole like speaking in jive and the like old woman. That one was just like hilarious. That one was so funny. What was the other one? The one where he was like, "Are you Abdul?"
By the way, here's one aspect you may not have gotten. The woman the older woman who translates jive, that's an actress, and I need to look up her name because she was a 1950s actress. I think she was in some really middle of the road sitcom kind of thing. So I would actually compare this to, have you guys seen Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a scene where Neil Patrick Harris has an appearance, right? And he plays a complete asshole. And so the joke is that the guy with the most wholesome image plays a complete jerk, right? Who is the worst person you've ever met. And this is kind of similar in that this is completely against type. And that's part of the joke, and that's something that's kind of lost on us.
And that's the thing about this movie is I can imagine just like so much of it is just enhanced by having that additional knowledge, but still being super funny, because again, like it's one scene that me and Jonathan that have come to watch this about 45 years later are still finding funny without even like knowing that context, without even knowing who that actor was. But to kind of continue on to some of the other ones I did like was the Abdul Jabbar Kareem joke or whatever, when the little boy just kept like saying, you're really that guy. I didn't search it up, but was it actually the actual basketball player that was playing that person?
That was him.
That was him, yeah. Okay, yeah. No, I did think so. I did think that probably would be the person, but it was just like the whole play on like this whole thing of like all black people look the same or whatever like that, which was funny.
Yeah, like the guy is kind of like the guy that he would hide from, an NBA career by just being a pilot on his off days, even to the point where he wears his like basketball jersey and shorts. Like when they pull him away from the co-pilot seat, he's wearing like the basketball shorts and everything. Yeah. I think that was the joke. It wasn't that because it's actually him, and he just entires like it's not like people are mistaking him for Abdul. What's the name? Abdul Jabbar Kareem. I think. Like, it's not like people are mistaking him for that because they think he looks that way. I think he like, it's actually him, and he just denies it because he's undercover. He's hiding by pretending to be a co-pilot. But anyway, anyway, but that, like, I had no idea who that was because I don't follow basketball.
The whole what was it one again? This week was a bad week to start drinking or something, like to stop drinking.
Yeah, that running joke.
That running joke throughout was just got me every single time as well. But yeah, there was a lot of moments. I don't know, Jonathan, if you had like any other to add in there.
I had a few. The first one was when, firstly, the Doctor, that was definitely my favorite character in this film. But it was usually with the Doctor. So the first one was when he kept on coming into the dock station, and he kept on saying, "Good luck, all count on you." I think he said it like 2 times.
3 times.
Yeah, was that a reference to something, or was just?
No, that was just first time makes sense. Second time is during the landing, and third time is after the landing, right?
And the second one was when he was telling one of the flight attendants that if you ate the fish, and telling him what the symptoms are going to be, and while the actual pilot was catching it at the same time, that synchronization there, what was he saying? That was actually really good. And the third one was actually the dance floor one, when the girl, I forgot her character, but the main character, she was dancing with like one of the old guys, and he got stabbed in his back, and then he was like, I think she was mimicking what he was doing. I don't even. Do you guys remember that scene? Yeah, that scene. That was funny. That was funny.
Oh, sorry. Can I add one more? When the main guy, I forget his name in this, was like sitting next to the people, he was just like over explaining his life and over explaining the situation, and that guy is like literally pouring gasoline over himself and is about to set himself on fire. That was Even with like the first time it happened with the old woman when she hung herself, I was like, I was like, damn. I was like, damn. Especially because she's the one that initiated the conversation. But that's like clearly like a situation you can easily get stuck in, where you try to be nice to someone and then they just kind of go off, and then you kind of like stuck with it like that. But yeah, no, the second time it happened with like the guy about to like set himself on fire, that one was funny.
The old lady committed suicide. That was like a shell shock moment for me. That's when I was like, okay, this is what separates the comedy from back in the day.
And then it gets worse, right? We've got the Indian guy who sets himself on fire. We've got the Japanese guy who commits suicide with a sword.
But that's actually a reference. That has to be a reference, because I think that's how they usually, like, even in the movie Shogun, that's usually like one of the first things they do when they take their own life.
He was dressed in a World War II, like Japanese World War II uniform, which is when that was still done in World War II, like having to commit suicide after a failure. So that wasn't completely random. A personal favorite of mine is in the very beginning, the two announcers who keep disagreeing with each other about in what zone the parking is, and they start arguing with each other, and it turns out they're married, and they just bring up all their old baggage in the announcement. That's a personal favorite of mine. I'm always a big fan of puns, so that the cockpit is Clarence, who gets clearance, and the navigator Victor, who has to give a vector. The captain is called over, so every time he uses the radio, it gets very confusing very quickly. Like, what's the vector, Victor? Do with Clarence. So yeah, we can go all night just talking about favorite jokes, and I think that's.
Can I give one more?
Go for it.
One more as well.
Can I give one more? Because it was just like so stupid. I don't even know why it tickled me, but
when they were like
asking, when they were like asking, is there a doctor on the plane? Is there a doctor? And then the woman was like, oh, I think this guy's a doctor. And he's just like sat there with like the medical equipment on. Just like the whole shebang. I don't even know why that got me, but that was funny.
And also there was one more, like they have like their like quick little moments that you don't like, that just kind of get you. Like there's one which when shit hits the fan, and shit literally hit the fan, and I was like, oh crap. I wasn't expecting it that one, but it's just the way the shit hit the fan. I was like, whoa.
I'm sorry, just one more. Just one more. Every time he kept saying Shirley, and he's like, stop calling me Shirley. Just like, I don't even know why. That just like every time that happened, I was just like,
the doctor was actually the doctor was actually needed.
He was great. Show. Yeah.
We can go all night just talking about the favorite ones. I'm always partial to the nun reads a magazine called Boy's Life, and then the boy sits next to her reading a magazine called Nun's Life.
I didn't even realize that. Oh crap!
So it's completely stupid, but it's just for some reason it's so funny.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Leslie Nielsen, right? And that was one of the topics I wanted to bring up, which is what, like, I think there's a couple of reasons for why this works, right? People always say you can't analyze humor or comedy, but actually you can point to very specific things that make this thing work. And one of them is Leslie Nielsen. So Leslie Nielsen was a serious drama actor at the time. and he had never done comedy, and so they hired somebody who could just say the most ridiculous lines with a completely straight face and then inject some gravitas in this. And this is why the movie works, right? Like, this is just demonstrate the power of deadpan. Like, my favorite style of humor is deadpan, where you just say something funny with a completely serious inflection. And I love doing that at work when people don't expect it, and there's new people on the team who are not used to this, and they're not sure if I'm joking or not. And it's just the best humor, because if it doesn't work, you can just move on. But if it does work, it makes it funnier. And this movie basically invented this, right? Or at least, like, after this, Leslie Nielsen had like 10 more movies like this. Not all of them nearly as good, but his entire thing is just saying just the most ridiculous lines for the straight face. And he's the president in Scary Movie 3, right? Where a bunch of gangsters die, like, are killed by the aliens. And he says, these men died for their country, send condolences to their hoes and bitches. Right? Like, that line is only funny if you deliver it with a straight face and a serious tone. Otherwise, it's a completely dumb line. Right?
Wait, so he had the same humor in those movies as well? Because I remember
that's why he was cast probably in Scary Movie 3, because at that point he'd been doing it for 20 years. But this is where it all started, right? This movie is made so much better by the fact that he just, like everybody in this is deadpan, but Leslie Nielsen is leading the pack. He's the most serious. He's just a serious actor saying serious lines, but it's stuff like "Don't call me Shirley."
The fact that he's like a doctor in it is that like someone that you're meant to take seriously as well, kind of adds to that level of sort of seriousness in sort of the delivery and seriousness in terms of like how you're meant to sort of take him in this movie, but he's still like delivering such good lines throughout.
One thing that was interesting as well, even though majority of them had kind of like that deadpan humor, you can still see different personalities in each of them. Like, for example, I forgot, I'm gonna refer to the main actor's girlfriend. She kind of had like a light, vibrant, kind of like goofy, dumbfounded look, whereas the guy had a more emotional, trying to win back my girl, seriousness, filled with sadness type of deadpan look. And then the doctor was just, he had kind of like that professional, but at the same time, I think his character was so funny because it was like a contradiction to his profession, because he was a doctor, but he was saying the dumbest things, which was so funny. That's what I found hilarious. I was like, okay, that's very smart. But yeah, so he kind of had like that whole professional dummy type of look as well. So it's crazy how they managed to, even though majority of them had that whole deadpan humor, it's kind of like fascinating to see that each of them had their own personalities, even though they're doing the same thing, functioning the same way. So yeah.
They're all serious, right? Nobody cracks a smile, nobody winks at the camera, right? But also, nobody ever breaks character, as far as I could tell. A lot of the time, these comedies will throw out what we know about the characters or the situation or whatever just to make a joke, and it doesn't fit into what's going on at all. And I think there's a fine line here. Like, there's surreal stuff in this, where, like, at one point where they're cutting back to the doctor and he's performing a gynecological exam, and it just makes no sense, right? That's just a gag. But it always keeps one foot on the ground, I think. Like, every time they make a joke like this, it still has something to do with what's going on, which is that he's a doctor looking after passengers, right? So I think one of the things where other comedies fall apart for me is when they become completely untethered to any kind of plot or groundedness. And this one manages to always kind of strike that balance, like almost always, I think. Another aspect of this is that this is a spoof of disaster movies, right? But this actually has a real plot, right? They serve tainted fish on the plane. Everybody has the fish. Everybody gets sick. Some guy who has to overcome his personal demons to land the plane. That's a real plot, right? Like, you can make a real movie like this, and it's called 0 Hour. It's from 1957. So they basically took the plot from I don't know how well known it was at the time, but just from a real disaster movie which has that same plot. And then it was so similar that they had to buy the rights before they released this movie, because it was that close. I think if you strip out the jokes, this still is a movie, because it's not simply a collection of jokes, right? And I think that really helps it hang together as well.
You know what's so crazy is, even in this silly, goofy movie, they made me feel for the main character. They made me feel like his emotional turmoil. They made me feel like his anxiety about sort of being on a plane, and you kind of, again, like, you were just rooting for him to overcome his fears and overcome sort of his demons, so that he can actually be with the girl that he wanted to be with. Which, it's like, fair play to this movie. This movie sort of got you to care more about his characters better than other movies that take itself way more seriously than this one does. Yeah, no, that's like another big bonus of this movie.
And I think that ties into my theory that comedy is actually one of the smartest genres and most difficult to write genres. Because in order to actually be funny, you have to be smart. You have to understand something well enough. One, to give it like a degree of realism. Like it has to connect to people's experiences. And you also have to understand it well enough to find the absurdity. I was actually rewatching some old Seinfeld episodes on Netflix over the past couple of weeks. And every episode of that starts and finishes with kind of his stand-up comedy. And it's this very classical observational humor, like what's the deal with airplane food, that kind of thing. But half the time it's just nonsense. Like it's willfully misunderstanding something. When he points out an absurdity in something, half the time it's actually not the case. It's not what's actually happening with that particular thing. And as a result, the joke completely falls flat. And I think, like you said, like Ted and Elaine have something real going on, right? And underneath all the jokes, there's real characters here, and like they have a real story. This is made by these three guys. They're called Zaz. So David Zucker, Jerry Zucker, and Jim Abrahams. And they made this and Naked Gun and Top Secret and a couple of others. And when you hear them talk about how they made these movies, they actually have a fairly strict set of rules. And one of them is there always has to be something going on, but there's always only one thing going on. So if you look at just about every scene, you either have a joke in the foreground and then nothing nothing weird happens in the background, or you have something serious, like you're introducing a character or you're moving the plot forward or something, and then something weird happens in the background, right? So for example, when we introduce the characters, like the actual scene of them arriving at the airport and taking their baggage out of the taxi and everything and checking in, that's all serious. But we then have the voiceover of the married couple arguing over the announcer system, right? But we don't have like that going on and like a wacky joke where I don't know, somebody trips over the suitcase or something. And then when that background gag is over, we get a foreground gag where Ted buys a ticket and they ask smoking or non-smoking, and he says smoking, and he gets a smoking ticket. And the ticket keeps smoking the entire time, like until he gets to the plane, right? So then, there's always a gag, but it's always either in the foreground or in the background, and the other side of it is real movie, is what I'm getting at. That is one of those things that, like, if you are making a comedy, I think this is the number one rule. That number one, there always has to be something funny going on, and number two, if something serious has to go on, you put something funny in the background. Right? And like if you watch the other movies by them, they work according to the same formula. And I think that's really smart, and you'll never get tired of it. Like at least when I watch it, I'm never say, okay, enough already. Can we get a break? Right? We never need a break.
And one thing about this humor as well, which makes it really good, is that it's not like performed theatrically. Like there's like realism in the way that they execute their joke. I'm not saying the joke necessarily is real, as in like it's something that would happen in real life, but I mean the way that they say it, the way that they communicate with each other is not like, because some of the comedies now is very like animated, whereas back then it felt very in this type of humor, it just feels more down to earth, more like how you would actually speak to someone or communicate with someone. So that's what, so that was it's definitely it's smart, and it's definitely hard to kind of like execute when it comes to the joke and as well as actually performing the joke. So yeah, man, this what's this humor called?
Deadpan, when you use a serious tone to tell a joke.
Yeah,
like there's very few funny voices in this, right? Very little. Like there's some slapstick, but like not a lot of people just tripping over things or just being idiots or anything like that, right? Like there's always a thought in it, right? And there's always kind of a point to it. Like even a lot of it is just very simple juxtaposition of two things, or something very like they set something up and then they subvert it with something unexpected, and that's by itself is funny. There's not a lot of like just outright silliness, like in the way you get in modern comedy sometimes, where especially like from the 2000s onwards, most comedies will just be people being stupid, and that's funny, and we're laughing at people. Here we don't really laugh at anybody.
No, yeah,
right? That's true. Yeah.
So like we do this joke about the missionaries, right? Where they go to Africa to teach them about civilization.
That one, Jesus Christ, that one was hilarious.
Why is it funny and why is it not problematic? I've got my answer, but what's yours?
Okay, I did half see some problems in there in terms of like the white man going and believing that he'd like sort of taught these people sort of how to do certain things or whatever like that when they probably could already do it or whatever. But
then it turns
for
into
me,
a Tupperware party.
yeah,
It's
which is just,
that's the joke.
yeah.
The joke is not, look at these primitive people. The joke is these Americans go to Africa and they try to sell them Tupperware because they think that's important.
Yeah, you say, okay, so
funny.
the context of that one I didn't.
The joke's at the expense of Ted and Elaine at that point, right?
That part maybe went a little bit over me or whatever. I was kind of like more focused on when they started playing basketball and
like the lunch budget money and like she's very clearly like in a sales routine trying to sell like Tupperware parties are kind of a thing of the 80s, I think. Like this is something that like is maybe already a little bit out of date, but I think it was clear that these were not practical tips she was giving.
I kind of like half got it, but didn't like fully kind of maybe appreciate the context of that one. But yeah, no, it was.
And then Ted teaches them basketball, and they're immediately
good
experts at it.
Yeah, that sounds like the stereotypes as well. That's showing as well.
But here we're laughing at the stereotype, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of what we said in our like scary movie video. We're making fun of the stereotype. It's only funny if you think this is absurd.
I actually found it funny when he was like, I should teach them basebole next. And I was like, that's probably not the sport that they're naturally good at or whatever like that. But yeah, when they all started like dunk, they were like literally just taking turns to just like dunk the ball out. Yeah, it was great. It was, again, like this is what I liked about the thing. It was like kind of like pushing the boat a little bit. It was like getting very close to the line, but never really crossing it fully. I would say
the principle here is very simple. We're not laughing at anybody. We're laughing at the absurd, like at an absurd exaggeration, or we're laughing at the stereotype, or we're laughing at something else, right? There's a punchline here, right? Like with the two guys speaking jive. Did you watch it with or without subtitles?
Without.
The joke is in the subtitles.
Oh, right, okay.
Because the way they're translated makes it funnier. So without it, without it, it's just jive is not a real language, right? It's more like a slang, I think. Like you can't take classes in jive. Like there's no native speakers of jive, right? So just treating it as a language like slots into this thing of just do something in an unexpected way, right? And then the subtitles translate them as like the most boring suburban square people you've ever met. So it's like it's not a simple translation. There's another level. There's another level of exaggeration in the subtitles.
You should have told us to watch it with the subtitles for that one, because that one completely missed it.
I actually thought it would automatically subtitle it, but the version I watched also didn't have subtitles in it. But I preview watched it with subtitles, so yeah, that only occurred to me later on. But yeah, like it's like you get only half the joke without the subtitles in that particular case.
My one came on with subtitles, thankfully, so
you can confirm it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
There's only one part where I didn't show subtitles for some reason. I don't know what was going on with ITV, but yeah. But no, it was funny though. And I was trying so hard to see if I was trying to not read the subtitles. Like I'd rewind it a bit just to see if what they're saying kind of like matches with the actual English, but it rarely did.
But it's not just gibberish, right? Like from what I can make out, it's more or less like it's real, like it's real dialogue. And the way the lore goes is that the writers had written something along those lines and just wasn't any good. So the actors said, let's give us 5 minutes, we'll come up with something. And then they basically improvised that dialogue on the spot, basically.
I was even more impressed then with the older lady if she just kind of had to jump in with them and improvise with them in like that 5 minutes and had to, because you're saying like she was like, probably like middle class woman or whatever like that, to then like have to like learn on the spot and whatever.
So I imagine they coached her on the day. Like she was supposed to do this, but then when they came up with the dialogue, they coached her on what like on the spot what the dialogue was. So imagine is what happened. I think that is one of those jokes that would make like if it came out today or if they made Airplane 2 today and there was a joke like that in there, that is the one where people would write like hand-wringing opinion pieces about. But actually, I don't think there's a problem here, right? Like I think we're not laughing at like. You have to really try to laugh at them for them to be the butt of the joke, right? I think just as with everything else in this movie, there's actually like a punchline there. Like there's either a pun or some absurd element or some exaggeration or some reference or something. You're never just laughing at somebody. Like there's this one exception. There's this stereotypically gay guy in the tower who just runs around screaming. And I think he's the least funny part. Like you were doing so well, like for 75 minutes. Like it's not like I have a problem with it. It's more like that's the least funny part. Like that's the one guy, like or the one joke where somebody's just acting silly.
No, I can't lie to you. I can't lie, Daniel. When he got into the woman that was like crying about her husband or whatever, and he was just like, "Your dress looks hideous," and then she started crying some more. I don't know, that one was like, but I do agree with you.
It's not all bad, but like on balance, if you had to cut something, I would cut this guy.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I can't disagree with that. He was not the best part, but yeah, he had his moments still.
Like this is 40 years old, right? And it still works. It just goes to show that you can't just be stupid or silly and call it a comedy. You actually this requires a lot of thought and craft and attention to detail.
Like a big shout out to the writers of this, because again, like I said, I think they found the right balance with the timing of this as well, with it kind of being an hour and 25, bringing you kind of like on a roller coaster ride where they're keeping you laughing throughout the movie, but they're kind of like bringing you up with like some like, you know, really big jokes that they're trying to land, and then just like small things in the background that you just like kind of like pick up and stuff like that. So I think they found a really good balance in this. It was like, I was about to say super relatable. It's not super relatable, but you can like see the relatability in what they were doing throughout this. And you know, I know you were mentioning about, was it Seinfeld or whatever, but like those are like my types of comedians, the ones that find the funny in the real. So, you know, things like Chris Rock that I grew up watching, you know, your Dave Chappelle's and stuff like that, just speaking on, you know, real life situations, real life experiences, and again, just finding the funny in it. This movie has so many pluses.
It's kind of low-key revolutionary for me because it's got me into kind of wanting to go and watch similar stuff. To be fair, I think the closest thing which I've seen similar to this in terms of like the humor, even though I don't really think it's deadpan, was Pink Panther. But it's got kind of like the similar humor to it. I love the Pink Panther, by the way. But yeah, it's definitely got me into wanting to go and watch more of this. Hopefully, when I say this, like I wanted to see more of it, I mean like in terms of like the humor, in terms of like the way the humor is pretty much deadpan. I want to watch more deadpan stuff. So yeah.
Another like big thing from this as well, like we touched on some of the cultural references that came out of this, but it's just like I don't know whether it was like the first one to do some of a joke like this where the woman's like sat on the seat and then they like shake, they were like all taking their time to like shake her and like hit her, and like it's like progressively getting worse, and you see like the long line of people and stuff like that. I don't know if it was like the first one to do it, but you see the influence of this in, you know, a lot later movies, and of course like the whole thing about like I like my coffee like black, so you know, just like I like my men. I've heard that line so many times and I've never known that it's come from this. And I'm sure that you can point out to a lot of like the other jokes in this that just like have influenced loads that have come afterwards. And like again, that's like the best thing you can ever like say about a movie is that, you know, other movies wanted to be like it, or like wanted to do something similar to it. So that's why for me, like as I was watching it, I was like, it feels like a like I'm obviously like this is my first time watching it. I don't know too much of what the consensus is around it, but to me, as I was finishing it, I was like, that really does feel like a classic. It feels like one that, you know, anyone can discover and anyone can love immediately.
Like, and there's other lines too, like surely you can't be serious. Yes, I'm serious, and don't call me Shirley. I've like I heard that referenced for years before I ever saw this. Like there's just so many. Like it's inspired like 2 generations of comedians at this point, right? Which makes it all the more strange that there's so little of it that's as good as this. Like this is not like, you don't need to be a genius to do this, right? You just need to kind of think about what's funny, and you need to kind of develop a specific style and then execute that style throughout, and make sure that like growing up on like 2000s comedies and later, it's like very few are actually, number one, almost none rise to this level just in terms of quality and being consistently funny. And also so many of them don't seem to know what's funny. Like a lot of the humor that I grew up with was just either laughing at people or just being silly or stupid. And the 2010s was kind of like the era of the stoner humor, which was just people being stupid again. And it's like, how hard can it be to actually like come up with some jokes like this? Like a lot of this is like I watched Shriek, if you know what I did last Friday the 13th. It was kind of like Scary Movie a couple of years before Scary Movie. And it's got a couple of jokes like that in this, right? So like there's like a water fountain, and there's a beer fountain and a vodka fountain, like in a high school. And like that's straight out of a Leslie Nielsen movie, right? Like this kind of side gag, and it starts off with something familiar, and then it exaggerates it and makes it absurder, and it keeps going. And it's clearly inspired by that. But that movie has like 3 jokes like that in there, and the rest is then like increasingly unfunny. So, and no, I'm not just picking on that one movie, but like it's so hard to find comedies that are consistently funny as opposed to having just a couple good jokes in them. One modern movie I would compare it to is Hot Fuzz. Have you seen that?
Hot Fuzz is fantastic.
Yeah, it's similar, right? It's like gag after gag after gag, and everyone is thought out, right? I would say it's very similar. Like the exact humor is different, but what it has in common is that it's a constant barrage of jokes, but you're never overloaded, and it never overstays its welcome, and each one had some thought put into it, right? It's taking its funniness very seriously. I think if I had to like name modern equivalents of this one, like it's Hot Fuzz, and not much else, right? It's not nothing, but like it's a short list.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's a very short list, and like for someone that does love comedy, I love comedy movies. We're in very short supply of very good ones, and like one that I will shout out is No Hard Feelings, and again that's with like Jennifer Lawrence, and she was obviously Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games and stuff like that. Never really done a comedy, so it's kind of like chuck her into that one. Like she completely killed it in that movie, and that's like probably one of the only comedies I've watched in the past couple of years that's even stuck with me at all. So yeah, hopefully there's like a renaissance of it at some point in the future where they kind of go back to making some good quality comedy movies. But yeah, we're not getting anything like Airplane at all at the moment.
One I kind of like, and I seem to be pretty alone on this, is A Million Ways to Die in the West. It's the Seth MacFarlane Western comedy.
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Apparently, like I think it's hilarious. It's like basically just set in the West, and like this sheep farmer gets caught up in a duel, and he needs to learn how to how to shoot a gun so he doesn't die in the duel. And the thing is just a setup for one joke about the Wild West after another. And then that is another one that's on the list. The Naked Gun is along this line as well, which is also made by Zucker and Abrams, and starring Leslie Nielsen, and they're making a remake of that this year. So there's a comedy that's supposedly along these lines coming out this year. I'm really curious how they're gonna do it. So stories by Seth MacFarlane, and other than that, there's a whole bunch of people in it that you've heard of, but none are known for being all that funny, which might be just trying to recapture the magic of Leslie Nielsen. My thing is just like people always talk about like what's even funny these days and can you even make comedy. And my take on it is that you can still make comedies, and there's plenty of comedies. But on balance, a lot of people have forgotten what comedy is. Because I think a lot of people have concluded that comedy is just laughing at people, and you're not supposed to do that anymore, and so we can't make comedies. But in terms of what's actually funny, and like things like the juxtaposition and the pun and the the absurd exaggeration and whatever, like all of these things that are like there's a toolbox of comedy, and Airplane just takes from the entire shelf, right? There's so many ways of being funny that don't involve laughing at people, but people don't seem to agree anymore.
And a lot of it is at the moment is just quippy lines in movies where everyone seems to be the same person making the same jokes all the time. It's kind of like the Ryan Reynolds effect and the MCU effect, where sort of kind of like everyone wants to be like the main character in whatever like is all the same, and they have like the same jokes and stuff like that. And it's just, I think a little bit played out, and there's room for different ways to do comedy. And again, there's a whole toolbox. There's a whole like sort of different techniques, different styles that can be used that are just a little bit underutilized just because they've seen that one method worked extremely well for a period of time.
Yeah. But it seems to be a general crisis of comedy, right? Like in the 2000s, I used to be really into stand-up comedy. And every couple of years, I kind of drifted away from it. And every couple of years, I kind of dip my toes into it. And it's so unfunny. Maybe I'm just looking at the wrong thing, but it's just purely validating people's opinions. That's comedy. Like, that's all of it. Like there's very little the kinds of jokes that this makes that is kind of divorced from anything like real world, really. It's more universal than that. And I don't know, maybe I'm just looking up the wrong comedians or something, but that seems to be the entire thing now. And that is just the death of comedy, I think. Like, that is just not even funny. I don't know. I'm just really curious how they can make a Naked Gun movie. Number one, just a straight up comedy in 2025, and number two, something that follows on from something so iconic as these Leslie Nielsen comedies from the 80s. Because like those are like the gold standard for a lot of people, including myself. I'm just, number one, they're benefiting from the name recognition, but they're also layering a lot of expectations on themselves, right? It's not just a comedy, it's a Naked Gun movie. So I'm really curious, like, if they can actually execute that style of humor, if there's actually an audience for it. Like, there seems to be, considering how popular Airplane and these other movies are. But does that translate into genuine movie-going audiences? I guess we'll find out later this year.
Yeah. Well, now that you've mentioned it, it's definitely gone up in my anticipated movies of the year. It's one that I'm kind of looking forward to checking out and seeing how they do.
All right. Any other last words on Airplane?
There's something in here for everyone. Definitely check it out. I know it's a 80s movie. If you're a little bit like me and you're a little bit hesitant about watching older movies, if you haven't seen it before, I know it's like, again, like quite popular, but if you haven't seen it before, it's a hidden gem. Check it out. You'll have a good time with it, and you'll want to watch it again.
Wow, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion, which didn't end up being a debate because we all loved the movie.
Let us know your thoughts down below in the comment section. What was some of your favorite gags from the movie, your favorite moments? And of course, if you liked the discussion, tell a friend. And if you hated everything we talked about, tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
You heard it here first, guys, and we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.